Thank you, organizers. Thank you so much. I always feel that as a presenter, when you're on the stage, there are a lot of people at the background, people who have booked your flight tickets, people who have booked your hotels. I saw yesterday developers were arranging chairs, fixing mics, putting the cameras on the right place. I'm so thankful for that. Thank you for everything. So we have this 3 days of conference, and whenever I go to every conference, I'm a hardcore programmer. I just do programming. So I do sessions either on design patterns or I do sessions on architecture, Angular. But this time, I thought that enough of that, must be, this time we should look at a larger picture. So this time my topics are a bit different. Probably many developers will not like it, but I feel that this is an important topic to be talked about. This is an important topic to be looked into. So in all these 3 days of conference, every day I'm going to go and speak about a software programmer who is also a hero, who has impacted the society in some or other way. Right? So in this first day of conference, I'm going to speak about Mr. Richard Stallman here. And then second day I have someone, and then third day I have someone. Now, before I start this session, let me put a very, very crisp disclaimer out here. Very, very crisp disclaimer out here that I have tried to be factually right as far as possible, but it is possible that due to my limited knowledge, due to my limited reading, I can be wrong in some places historically as well, and some places I can be up and down, right? So in case I'm doing that, please go ahead and let me know. So whatever I express here are all my personal opinions, and they do not belong to that individual, right? But the whole goal here is to highlight you these heroes who have dedicated their whole life for something, and as a developer we are never aware of it, right? So everyone has heroes in their life, and in reality people have multiple heroes. A lot of people admire their mom and dad, some people admire politicians, some have their favorite movie heroes. And I'm a software developer, and I have my own set of software heroes whom I admire upon, whom I look upon. Some of our software heroes are known because they are rich, they established big multinationals, they have high soaring profits, right? And some have great fame, and some have created something great in software, so they are known for it. But then there are few software heroes who have brought in revolution for humankind, for mankind, for human race. They fought against software injustice. They fought so that few software companies do not just make huge money, and software does not dominate the human life, human values. They contributed to the ethical and the human part of software development. So in this talk, I'll be walking you through Mr. Richard Stallman, who contributed, who fought for freedom, justice, and ethics as a software developer. Richard Stallman is a software freedom activist. So he did two important things. The first is he started the free software social movement. That word is very important. It was a movement actually. Second is he's the man behind creating the GNU project. The whole goal for what he fought throughout his life is freedom to the end user for using their computer. So the end user should have freedom to control his computer. The computer should not control the user. So if there is any software installed in the end user's computer, the end user should have the right to modify, to read, improve, and run the software anywhere else. In simple words, give freedom to end user to control the software of his computer. So where did it all start from? So it all started in the early 80s. Now by heart, Richard is a hacker. Now hacker does not mean a security hacker, what you have heard about. Hackers are developers. Developers who love to share knowledge, who love to show their code. They want liberty to see others' code, give suggestions, improve, and they want other hackers to contribute to their code as well. So when Richard was working in AI lab MIT, which had this hacker environment, while working, he wanted to modify a software of Xerox 9700 series machine, wherein a message will be sent to all logged in users waiting for the print jobs if the printer was jammed. Now Xerox as an organization did not have this policy of modification of their software, so they did not have such kind of policies, to give the software out, so that end users can change it. And in that era, software cost was multiply high than the hardware cost. There was huge monopoly of software vendors who were literally taking twice the money of hardware. So after looking at so many incidences, Richard got into thinking. He thought that if you do not have freedom, then what do you have? The person who owns that computer or who uses that computer should have the freedom to control his softwares, to change his softwares, to read his softwares, to know, to see that if there are issues, he can fix it himself if he wants it. Freedom. So he fought for four important principles, four important freedom. So with this whole goal, he left MIT and dedicated his whole life for free software social movement. And the main goal of this free software social movement was to demolish the license raj of software. So the four F's were the freedom to run the program for any purpose anywhere. Second, freedom to study how the program works and change if you want to. The third freedom, the freedom to redistribute and make copies so you can help other people. And the last freedom is to improve the program and release your improvements to the public so that the whole community is benefited. He also coined the term copyleft, which very much opposes the thought process of the term copyright. Copyright strangles democracy, while copyleft supports the four F's of freedom which we just discussed. But at the same time, Richard was never against business, or I'll say he is never against business. He does business himself. He was always very clear about the word freedom, because this word freedom means different for different people. Here the freedom, what he means here is freedom of speech than free beer. Free means freedom and not price. So yes, you can and you should earn money from your software installations, but give the end user the freedom to control, read, change and improve the software, and thus keep the human ethics and principle high. So now with all these four F's, in 1984 he started building the free operating system called as GNU. The goal was to make something like Unix, but everything should be free so that the end users can control it. Democracy. Democracy was the whole goal of GNU. So in 1991, he almost finished the GNU system, and the system had a lot of components, which were contributed by different developers with the ethical mindset of free software, with the ethical mindset of those four F's. But one major component was missing, and that is the kernel. At the time, Linus Torvalds, I don't know how do you spell it, I'm sorry, English is my second language, but Linus Torvalds wrote the kernel called as Linux. So with the combination of GNU and Linux, a completely free operating system was available, and it started becoming very popular. But along the way, many people forgot GNU and they just called it Linux. In between, people were saying GNU Linux, GNU Linux, but then later on, because it was small, it was sweet, because people were lazy, they just called it Linux. This is where Richard felt that ethical, the political, the human part of GNU is forgotten. And this is where you can say a sore taste between free software or GNU versus Linux started. And a second movement started called as the open source movement. Now, according to Richard, this movement the open source movement is very different from free software. Definitely it started from free software, but it is very different because the open source movement only talks about practical performance benefits. It loses the focus of ethical and the human values. Also, OSI has some licenses, which are restrictive in nature and which goes against the theme of free software principles. So if you are standing before Richard Stallman, be very clear about free software and OSI. They are different things. Open source is different than free software. I repeat 2-3 times on the stage. Free software is different from open source. Free software is different from open source. Open source is a development model, while free software is a social movement. Open source locks you down with some restrictive licenses and violates the principle of free software, right? But free software is actually a movement. Now, these are all words of Richard Stallman. These are not words of me. But the one thing which I feel as a user is, or as a developer, is that if free software movement had not started, Linux won't have got created. And because of whatever, right, the open source then got initiated. So I think everything started because the free software movement was initiated. So with all respect, Richard Stallman started that initiative, and today we are seeing it more improvised, or whatever you say, the open source initiative. Definitely, as I've said again, this is what Richard Stallman says in all of his speeches, in all of his writings, that both of them look very much alike, but they are different in terms of principle. That's very important. And open source does have some restrictive license, where it says that this belongs to me, while free software, the whole goal of free software runs around those principles of 4Fs. So there is a principal difference between open source and free software. So never say open source is free software and never say free software is open source. Both are different things. So as every hero has controversies, even Richard Stallman, also sweetly called as RMS, is not away from controversies. Because one of the things, which is talked about Richard Stallman in circles is that he is stubborn, he is aggressive, and must be because of his love towards free software. So when Steve Jobs expired, he said that I'm not glad he's dead, but I'm glad he's gone, right? So some of the statements of RMS is really controversial, but I think it all comes from the mindset of giving more to human values. So it's a kind of a hardliner, but that's how the reality is, right? So if you want to really work for human values, you certainly are categorized into hardliners and stubbornness and aggressiveness and so on. Also, like one of the incidents, which happened with Linus. So Linus was giving him the award to the Free Foundation, to the Free Software Foundation, and he said that, oh, so you are a guy who is promoting open source. I am the person who is supporting free software. So you are giving award to a rebel. So again, like Linus versus Richard is a very common thing you can find on YouTube. So if you go and search on YouTube, if you go and search on Google, you'll find that Linus has his own conservativeness, when it comes to talking about Richard, when it comes to talking about the open source or free software movement. Now, with all this, I would like to also talk about the Indian connection of Richard Stallman, which is very important. So, Richard Stallman was at Freedom First. So in July 2001, he had visited India, and you would be very surprised to know that Kerala was the first state to embrace this free software principles. I'm not sure how much they are following it because it's very difficult to follow, but I hope so that they are following it at some stage. So basically, the Kerala government or the Kerala state government, they said that, okay, we would like to install free softwares, free software principled operating systems, in our states, in our government offices, in our schools. And that's where, this fsf.org.in was created. So if you visit this site, it is specially created for Free Software Foundation of India. Now, in today's Indian context, if you see, we have cities and cities of IT. You can see Bangalore, you can see Hyderabad, you can see Chennai, you can see Pune, Mumbai, Calcutta, like it's all over. We are filled with IT. Our generations and generation of engineers have gone as programmers. So with all this, I think this is a very important part, the human part of programming. So guys, think for a while about the free software principles. Think for a while that how we can contribute to the society, how we can give that freedom to the end user so that they can take our wonderful code and make their life better. Definitely we have to earn money. As the free software principle says, we have to earn money, and money is important, but it cannot be at the sacrifice of a freedom, right? Freedom of the end users. So with all this, I'm going to go and end this session. But before ending this session, let me play the free software song by Richard Stallman, which talks about the rights of end users, right? Or the rights of the users to do the 4 F's for a code, right? So here is the song by Richard Stallman. He is himself singing this song, and also I put the lyrics at the side, and I will then get questionnaire after this. Thank you so much.
Join us now and share the software. You'll be free, hackers, you'll be free. Join us now and share the software. You'll be free, hackers, you'll be free. Hoarders can get piles of money. That is true, hackers, that is true. But they cannot help their neighbors. That's not good, hackers, that's not good. When we have enough free software at our call, hackers at our call, we'll kick out those dirty licenses evermore, hackers evermore. Join us now and share the software. You'll be free, hackers, you'll be free. Join us now and share the software. You'll be free, hackers, you'll be free.